Hello and welcome to Data Driven, the podcast where we explore the emerging fields of data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. This episode kicks off season 4 of the show, and we are quite excited to have Rick Hall to talk to us about data analytics, entrepreneurship, and the impact of COVID on remote work. Without further ado, here are your hosts, Frank Lavinia and Andy Leonard.
Hello and welcome to Data Driven, the podcast where we explore the emerging fields of data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. If you like to think of data as the new oil, then you can consider us Car Talk, because we focus on where the rubber meets the road. Although in the COVID lockdown, it's not really much of a road trip going on, but however, I do, as always, have with me for season 4, of course, Andy Leonard. How's it going, Andy?
Hey, Frank, it's going pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. This is the first one we've recorded in a while without video. So
Yep.
Feels kind of nice. I can wear my hoodie and not have to comb my hair.
That's cool.
Want to tell the folks about an interesting email you got today from the MVP program.
Yeah, so it was really neat because I had been in contact with my MVP lead, and I will botch her last name, so I'll just say Rochelle and leave it at that. And she's awesome, and she found out what we were doing and highlighted our other podcast, which we've kind of blended them to start with here, Impact Quantum, where we've discussed our thoughts about quantum computing, where we've had, I don't know if we've had a guest or at least released a show yet with a guest.
Not yet.
Not yet. So we're working on that, but the idea is that it could be its own podcast. It could be, a category under Data Driven. There's a lot to do there. There's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, I think there's we're keeping it listing it as a separate podcast for now. It just makes more sense. It has its own domain name, impactquantum.com.
Yep.
You can search for your favorite store. It's in Amazon. It's in iTunes, Spotify, you name it. It's there. We're there too. Also, as a fun factoid, I added 2 Alexa skills, flash briefing skills, so you can hear our wonderful voices as part of your flash briefing skills on any Alexa-enabled device.
Or we're recording this on the 30th of October, so you could take that with you tomorrow and use it to scare people, especially with my voice. I'm just saying.
All right, well, with that, let's not scare anyone off any further. We have a wonderful guest here today. First time we had a guest kind of on the show as well, because mostly it's just you and me kind of chatting and answering questions on the live feed. Yeah. But today, we have Rick Hall. And Rick Hall is a software entrepreneur focused on the analytics market. He's led the development over a dozen different software products and has taken several companies from the early stage to an eventual exit by sale. And he's been working in analytics and software for 30 years and has been a part of the evolution of several generations. He's seen the evolution of several generations of technology and practices. Currently, he's the CEO of Aginity Corporation, where the tagline is Supercharge your SQL Experience with analytics management. And Aginity Corporation is the only next-generation analytics management toolset designed specifically to empower analytic teams to take advantage of the top analytic platforms. Well, there's definitely a lot to unpack there. And so without further ado, welcome to the show, Rich.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate being here with you today.
Awesome. It's great to have you. And so we were talking kind of in the virtual green room, if you will. You used to live in the D.C. area.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So one of my companies was right there in D.C. One of the first places I did some kind of bigger data work, and just recently moved out to Colorado.
Nice. Do you ski?
I do. Yes.
So that was a smart choice.
Yeah. We got a little bit of snow, but we'll see what the year brings.
Yeah, that's right. So you also mentioned that you were part of the BI Partner Advisory Council.
I was, yes, yeah.
So do you want to tell us what that was?
Yeah, so kind of when Microsoft went to get into the BI space, as you probably know, they brought in a guy named Bill Baker. Bill had been the original architect of a platform called Express that Oracle had bought, and Microsoft brought him in, and he started this program to build analytics, which started with analysis services and a whole bunch of other stuff. And Bill recruited a number of consulting firms to, kind of provide ideas about what they were doing. I was at the time a partner in a small consulting firm that had been doing data and analytics in telecommunications and banking and financial services, and somehow got an invite to join that group. And got to kind of work with Microsoft through the development of analysis services from, say, SQL 90, I want to say 97. I hate to say that because it makes me an old guy. Through the 2005, kind of at the point where Power BI started to eclipse that platform. And what that whole process was, as you may know, is that the Microsoft team would bring all their engineers in front of this group of consultants, and they would all tell us what we were doing, and we would all tell them what we thought was a good idea or a bad idea or whatever. And that's how it worked.
That's cool. That was I was not involved in that because at the time I had not listened. May not have even met Andy. But I didn't listen to Andy till about 4 or 5 years ago about making the switch from software development into data. So,
yeah, we met in 2006. So,
2005.
Sorry, actually, it was 2000. Sorry, late 2005, November 2005. Now that I recall, but that's really cool because I'm familiar with Bill Baker. I got involved with data warehousing officially in the 2000. Era, and that's where kind of where I planted there. I did some work in that field, SQL Server 6.5 and 7.0, and I remember Bill Baker from reporting services, analysis services, and integration services. So, very visionary time there for Microsoft.
Yeah, it was, and of course Microsoft's doing some really great stuff now. But as you guys know, it's amazing how much the technology has moved on, right? And, we've seen kind of a whole nother revolution in how analytics is done since then, which is really kind of cool.
Yeah, it's been amazing. And I know, my second job out of college was working as a webmaster at barnesandnoble.com. So I'm right there with you with the, being the old guy. But it's okay because OG can stand for old guy or original gangster, depending on your point of view. So I prefer the latter, but, that's just me.
Yeah, there you go.
So tell me about kind of what Aginity does. That I love the tagline, supercharge your SQL experience with analytics management.
Yeah, yes. So I... as I mentioned, I've been around the analytics space for a long time. The company that I was with when I did the work at Microsoft, got sold, and then I formed another one, which we eventually sold to Nielsen. And after kind of doing the corporate experience for a while, I decided I wanted to come back and do another early stage company and try to really look at what I've learned. And I was really focused on the problem of, once you get the data, how do you get the data to a place that somebody can actually use it for analytics, right? So, that 80% of the work that goes into data prep before AI, right? So all the AI stuff is super cool. And every time you talk to a data scientist or go to a data conference, they always say, and first you get the data. And that's kind of like that phrase starts their discussion. I'm like, well, wait a minute.
Right.
first you get the data is the hard part in a lot of cases, right? So
Yeah,
that's
you're not
the problem.
you're not just starting with dessert. You're starting with like the whipped cream on top of this ice cream sundae. Like,
Yeah, exactly. So what Aginity does, right? And I had the opportunity to kind of to actually buy Aginity, which had been around the space for some time, is we provide a tool set for analytic or data engineers and business analysts to build their core data manipulation capabilities before AI. So we sit on top of the big data platforms. So we sit on top of Redshift and Microsoft Synapse and Snowflake and Hive and, kind of a bunch of these platforms. So we're not the compute layer, but we're the layer that lets you build reusable SQL. So great SQL, IDE tool across all these platforms with a catalog built in to create kind of reuse of those components and addressing some of the problems around data ingestion and data profiling and data mapping that all goes into that kind of work of, and first you get the data.
entire books have been written about that, like entire one sentence. First you get the data,
Right?
And whenever you see these, like GPT-3 is probably the poster child for this, right? In the sense that everyone's all excited about what GPT did, and it was like, wow, it had 1.5 billion parameters and took $12 million to train, but there's no talking about like how much data engineering went into providing that training material in a way that could be consumed.
Yeah. So what got me really passionate about this space is, I had this company called G4 Analytics. We were doing analytics for around pricing and promotion in the retail space, and we sold that company to Nielsen. And at Nielsen, we had all the retail data from like 30 countries and, all this store level data. And we're trying to predict promotional performance. And I know you guys talk a lot about predictive analytics. We can talk about that. But the first thing you have to do before you can predict promotional performance is you have to identify what was a promotion.
Yes.
So you might have POS data. That's great, which point of sale data. But you have to figure out what in that data is a promotion. What's the beginning date? What's the end date? You have to build something called a baseline, which is what would have happened had you not promoted. And then you have to figure out, well, what's the difference between that and what did promote? And all of that becomes input to a predictive model, right? So there's a ton of work. And I think many analytic problems have that kind of work. The data doesn't tell you everything you need before you're going to do the analysis, and you have to figure that out. So that's the kind of passion. I kind of had a passion for that problem and how much time and effort is spent on that problem. And that's kind of what we kind of try to solve at Aginity and, what our tool sets are doing.
That's cool. That's cool. Go ahead, Andy.
I was going to say, Rick, I think a lot of it's very easy for people outside our field to look at what you're talking about, which kind of falls under data wrangling, but it also falls under setting up all of the comparative stuff that you need to perform a good analysis of it. And I think a lot of folks outside of our field look at that and go, well, that must be easy. And the truth is you can be off just a little and really, really skew the results.
Yeah, you can. It's, we were talking to a client recently, a big retailer, and they told us they had 34 different ways to measure coupon count.
Huh.
Wow.
And I thought, well, if you have 34 ways to measure it, well, that means 33 of them at least are wrong. Right.
Maybe all 34.
Maybe all 34, right? Because all the stuff that goes into preparing the data, right? So, this problem really persists around how do you get the core calculations and core data right? And that's, what we think of as analytics management is doing all that. And, kind of there's this interesting thing that I've really only come to recently, which is a view that this core problem is less an engineering problem and more of a biology problem.
Oh,
How
that is
so?
interesting.
Well, think of it like this. When, you talk about data warehousing, and in the data warehousing days, when it was purely, we'd go off and we get the data, assuming you can, and we build a bunch of logic into the process of loading the data into the data warehouse, and then we present some answer to the business, right? And hopefully we're presenting them the answer they need. And there's a lot of work that goes into that process over time, right? Well, that's great if you're providing an answer that you have to provide over and over again.
Right.
But let's say you're the head of sales at a retailer, and this crazy thing called COVID comes along. And now you're suddenly worried about what's the impact of test rates of COVID on my sales at different retail stores, right?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
So you go to the data team, the engineering team, and you say, hey, can you bring in this COVID data into my study so I can see that impact on sales? And they say, absolutely. I'll be back in 6 months with the answer.
Right.
And you say, well, I got to stock the stores next week, right? So you get some business analyst on your team, right, who's got a business degree or an MBA if he's lucky or she's lucky, and you say, look, take whatever the heck is in the data warehouse and figure out how to munge in the data on COVID cases and give me some kind of an answer to this problem, right? And so you got this whole community of business analysts who are downstream from this well-engineered data pipeline, and they're trying to answer questions at the speed of business, right? And they're doing it in Excel, and they're munging the data on their own. And that's how you come up with these 34 different ways to measure coupon count, right?
Oh, I see.
And so what we need is a paradigm that empowers these downstream business people and it lets them then take an analytic and let it be somehow curated so it can evolve into becoming the standard analytic, right? So we're not going to have the perfect engineering to answer every question. Some things are very repeatable. They're very standard. We know how we're going to calculate, net margin or whatever it is. But so many business questions are answered initially in the heat of the moment. And what we need is the ability to support that and then let that evolve into the best answer, the reused answer, right? So that I think of that as more of a biology paradigm than in this pure engineering paradigm.
Well, I hear you. And I think after we go through, the pandemic, and hopefully, we will make it through that and everything will be fine. Everybody will then have the answers that you just described. They'll have the answers to that problem. But one of the things Nassim Taleb talks about all throughout Black Swan and some of these other books is predicting the unpredictable and how difficult and challenging that can be. And I'm curious, does Aginity's tool set, does it speak to that?
Yes and no, right? So our tool set is not doing the prediction itself, right? So we're not doing the data science algorithms, right? We're not doing the machine learning. We're helping you build the core data to service those problems, right? So when the unpredictable happens and you have a new set of data that you need to utilize, that's where we're going to be really powerful. So we're going to give you the ability to get that data in, ingest it as an analyst, do the core calculations, and feed it into whatever you're trying to do. You're absolutely right. Nassim is absolutely right. We certainly saw that with this promotional work that I did at Nielsen. You can guarantee, by the way, that all of those promotional analytics, went completely left when COVID came along, because you go talk to retailers, and if you're in the food space in retail, well, your sales went off the chart, right? But if you were selling, jeans, well, maybe nobody was coming into your store, right?
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's definitely COVID, I think we'll be talking about COVID at least for the next 20 years in terms of not just the obvious kind of consequence of it, but I mean, in terms of just the data analytics and supply chains. We've never really been in a society this vulnerable to supply chain disruption at this scale.
Yeah.
And probably because we were victims of our own success in the sense that we haven't had a major pandemic for about a century like this. But it's definitely going to be a case study in terms of data analytics and, kind of not just the volume and but also the veracity of the data, right? There's a lot of people who, arguing to this day about the efficacy of mass lockdowns, right or wrong. We won't know.
Yeah.
Because this seems like a slippery little bug that is just really hard to contain.
Yeah. It's been nutty and crazy times and not so good. I think you guys have talked about something that I've heard you say that, Satya and others have said that this has sped up this evolution in innovation, right?
Yes.
And, I had the fortune of buying Aginity in March of this year.
Oh, wow.
And, 3 days after we completed the deal, the lockdown came, right? So,
my goodness.
So my executive team has actually never met face to face.
Wow.
They're spread out, and I had a couple people who came with me from my company that I had founded, and a couple people from the company that we purchased, and we're living on Zoom and Microsoft Meeting, and it's working remarkably well. I mean, you obviously want to get together with people, but probably only 20% or 10% of the amount of time you needed to get on planes before was really ever necessary, right?
There's a lot to that, and I think that in terms of business travel and stuff like that, you're right. And I've worked for companies that were just either my personal experience is that there's no middle ground. Like, companies would either be irrationally against remote work or totally fine with it, and nobody in the middle. And I think that the pandemic forced a lot of the folks that were irrationally against it to reevaluate their stance.
Yeah. Here's a funny kind of side story to that. I spent about a year doing a bunch of consulting with Silicon Valley companies after I'd left Nielsen, and I was working for a VC-backed company out there, and they were hiring engineers, and they're paying engineers in Silicon Valley $280,000 right out of college.
Right.
And if an engineer making $280,000 in San Francisco was married to another engineer making $280,000, they could about buy a house, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. And I said to these guys, I said, look, I've worked with these engineers in these other places. And, we can put together this team to do these certain components. And they were dead set against it. The whole Silicon Valley culture was like, no, you've got to be here.
Yeah.
That's you can't innovate anywhere but in our little bubble, right?
Yes.
And
hold that thought. Like you're like, it's like you're tapping into my brain because there's a lot I want to unpack there. But it's a true story. I had an interview with a very major Silicon Valley company, and I didn't really want to relocate to the Bay, but I figured, you know what, I'll go on the interview. So I went there, and everything went well, but ultimately, when I looked at how much I'd have to spend just to get the same house I have here in Maryland, it was like $2-3 million.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And I'm like, I like the job, but I don't like it that much.
Yeah.
But you said something there that really struck at this. So one of the things, and since this is data driven, this is our first podcast. We love this audience. We love all our audiences, but one of the things that's in the pipeline is a third podcast, and we're still working out the logistics of it, about startups and innovation outside of the traditional areas. I like to say outside the Pacific time zone.
There you go.
Because I think that there was innovation happens everywhere, right? But I also think that the pandemic has really altered the conversation, because why am I going to live in poverty, or poverty is a strong word, but why am I going to spend 80% of my income on housing?
Yeah.
Not to say, and plus if you have kids, then you know that
Sure.
expenses go up. When I can live anywhere in the world, theoretically, and choose my lifestyle as opposed to having my lifestyle chosen by me.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic, right? And I, kind of been through the same process. And the analytics company that I'd sold to Nielsen, we were kind of distributed, but we always had a hard time convincing funders and others that, well, what do you mean you don't have a location, right?
Right.
So now with Aginity, we are distributed. We're spread between over 9 time zones from Silicon Valley, where we are headquartered, to Central Europe, and the team's working remotely and in a distributed fashion, and now that's okay, but it wasn't okay for a long time, and I think certainly, kind of there'll be a lot of analytics about that as well. So I guess it's a sideline, but anyways,
that's what we do.
Yeah, no, it was perfect.
We do tend to meander. But one of the things that I think you've done, and I don't want to speak for the audience, because this is something I've always, kind of daydream about. You've been a software entrepreneur, not just once, but it sounds like a couple of times.
Yeah.
What are the upside? Well, everyone will tell you all the downsides. And everyone will tell you all the upsides, right? But really, what are the real reward? What are the real challenges? What are the real rewards of being a software entrepreneur?
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of things to it, right? So the first thing is that I think you should be an entrepreneur of any type if you just have it in your genes, right? Because we all hear the stories about the Googles of the world, right? They had a great idea. Everything went perfect. They're worth billions of dollars. Good for them, right? But they're the way outlier in the entrepreneurial space. When I started, G4 was the name of the company that I had sold to Nielsen. We literally started it on September 10th, 2001.
Oh, my God.
And we had a big funding dinner in Seattle, actually at a Microsoft event. We were there for that. I was teaching at a Microsoft BI conference. And, I got up the next day after this big fundraiser the night before, went for a run, came back, walked into the building, watched the planes crash into the World Trade Center, right?
Wow.
And so, what started out great had some very kind of up and down times. Now, we ultimately had great success, but I ended up in the process of 12 years, 2 different times, once right then and once in the financial crisis of 2008, I guess, going a year without salary. So you better want it, right? Because in an entrepreneurial setting, if you don't double down at the moment of greatest risk, well, nobody's going to do it for you, right? So now the rewards are great if you pull it off, and I think a lot of times it's about persistence. I've learned a bunch. I made a bunch of mistakes, but it's about kind of having an idea, figuring out an audience, finding a way to kind of iterate on your idea with that audience, and if you can produce something useful, then you can build a business around it. And I think the biggest reward of any entrepreneurial space is when you produce something useful that people like, right? So, our Aginity product, we have a freemium model. So you can download it for free. And if you like it, you can pay for it. And if you pay for it, then we have a premium on top of that, right? So unless we produce something useful for you, you're not going to buy our product, right? And so it's kind of a great thing in the sense that I'm going to have to give you something valuable for you to decide that you want to do business with me. And I'm going to have to keep making it value for you to subscribe over time and for you to tell the man or the woman in the next cube that they should go try it out too, right? And so I think that the ultimate thing about, success in software today is, can you produce something valuable? That's the reward. If you're just trying to make a ton of money, I'm not sure if there are easier ways, but
it sounds like this is probably not the easiest.
It's
I don't know where it would fall on the spectrum, but I know roughly where it would fall on the spectrum, but probably not on the easy side.
Yeah,
but that's an interesting thing you brought out, like in terms of you have the freemium model, and you're seeing that in a lot more places, in a lot more industries, whether that's the self-improvement world, right? Grant Cardone does a lot of free training, but he also uses that as a funnel to pay for his more expensive programs. So when I say expensive, I mean expensive. But I also see, you see that with like a lot of streaming platforms, or Restream, for example, has a free offer, but it's once you start using it and you like it, you know what? I'll pony up the money. Andy and I are both customers of theirs. So do you see that that being more the norm rather than the exception going forward?
I think whether it's free or just trial or some kind of easy entry, get it useful fast before you make a big deal. Yeah, I think that's the model, right? And in the past, we would always try to sell the enterprise deal, right? And you go to the CIO or the CTO and you give them some great grand vision. And if they buy into it, great, they buy your software. But then Joe user or Sheila user, looks at the software and has to use it to do their job. And, half the darn time they say, this doesn't do what I need. This is crazy. Or I don't want to change my business process for whatever reason, right? So a lot of enterprise software never made it off the shelf, right? And so, the good thing about this kind of freemium model is, one is, if you don't produce something that the person on the ground will use, you're dead in the water.
Right.
And the second thing is that you don't have to sell the grand vision. You can prove your value incrementally, right? So that's a huge thing. I mean, we have customers, big, giant customers with 50 seats or 10 seats. And we have, right now, our biggest is 3,000 seats. And, that didn't come from going to the chief information officer and saying, hey, go buy this thing. It came from 10, 100 people starting to use it, word of mouth, sharing it, and then going and saying, hey, look, we got all these users. Let's standardize on it. And it's a completely, you've proven the value. And the other part of the model, which I think is really key now, is subscription, right? So,
yes.
And I think that's really important to the software business. It's good economics for the buyer and for the software company, right? Because if you don't keep adding value, their subscription is going to go away, right?
Right. It also makes it more affordable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like in terms of just, here's a practical example for me. It's like, if you wanted to buy the super duper Adobe Creator packages, at one point it was $13,000.
Right.
Now it's $50, $60 a month, which is way more easier to sell to the spouse.
Yeah. Maybe you're a spouse. I don't know about mine, but it's like our product, our Aginity product. We got probably, I don't know, I want to say 100 person years invested in development. our free product is free. Our basic product Pro, it's $125 per user per year. And then we have a premium product, which is 5 times more than that, right? So it's about that incremental value, and I think that's just it's a good thing, right? If you're a business analyst, you got to wrangle some data. Hey, try it out. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, tell us. But you're not out $13,000, right?
Right. Right. I mean, that does seem to be where a lot of things are headed. I mean, in terms of, just think of cloud services, right? Like and this is an example I give all the time and it's amazing how many people have not kind of caught on to this late in the game. I didn't catch on to a few years ago. So, but I mean, it's just, if I wanted to start a book selling company online in 1996, right? I would have to shell out. I mean, Barnes & Noble shelled out $2, $3, $4 million in hardware and infrastructure and services before they sold their first book.
Yep.
Right? If I wanted to do that again in 2020, putting the wisdom of starting an online bookseller to compete with Amazon aside, I could probably get away with as little as $10,000.
Yeah. Well, it's that whole walk up, sign up, and pay incrementally model that the cloud is done. And I think I've heard you guys say elsewhere, things are changing so quickly. The fact that you don't have to buy all this hardware, you can try things out, and if things change, you can increase your compute or decrease your compute or change which type you use. That's a good thing, and that's a really cool set of innovation, which I think is going to allow a lot more stuff to get done a lot quickly.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
It's very true. And Rick, I'm going to pause for a minute after we get done recording today and add a new bullet to my resume that says, Rick Hall listened to a podcast I co-host. Just the Rick Hall.
I know. I was like, wow, you've referenced some of the things we've said. I'm thinking like, I gotta tell Andy, like, holy cow, he listens to us. That's cool.
Of course I do. I like your stuff. Right? I like the banter, right?
Cool.
Well, we were. I won't go down that path, but that's just awesome. I'm honored, and I can tell Frank's honored. We're not faking this. We are really honored. Thank you so much for that.
A couple of times you said that, and I was like, wait a minute, did he just say he listens to our stuff?
I was there. It's right there. So we'll pivot now, as we do in other shows that you've listened to, Rick. And we've got a list of questions. We send these questions ahead of time just so the audience knows, because although a lot of good stuff comes out of this first part of the show. So we start with how did you find your way into data itself? I know you obviously rocketed up there and served on these councils that you were mentioning and stuff like that. But did data find you, or did you find data, Rick?
Yeah. So I started kind of playing with computers in high school. When I got to college, I got kind of interested on the side, and my first job out of college was working for a political group doing door-to-door canvassing.
Wow. And
back in the day, everything was kept on note cards. And I kept saying to the director, we got to automate this stuff. And finally, one day, she just said, oh, just shut up and go do it, right? And that's how my career in software started, by the way. So that was like build a database, right? So I didn't know what a database was, and I had to go out and learn about, data model and normalization and that kind of stuff. So I started out building, kind of basic SQL databases. That's how my career started. But, I got hooked up with this group that was doing work in telecommunications. And so we were working with AT&T during the breakup. Again, I'm putting myself way back there. And a lot of what they were trying to do was answer business questions. So this new world of data warehousing was just kind of coming along, and you had Inman and kind of Kimball. And so, kind of that's how I really got started. I got started building just basic transactional databases, membership system for a nonprofit, did a little bit of consulting. They were trying to build databases to answer reporting needs. That got me into data warehousing. From that data warehousing work, I got working on bigger and bigger data warehousing problems. That got me associated with Microsoft and the BI council we talked about. And, kind of it's just evolved from there.
That's cool. You kind of touched on this, but specifically, what's your favorite part of your current gig?
There's a lot of things. I like doing it. I mean, I have a young team, so I like kind of coaching them and telling these kind of stories, right? And, about what we've kind of learned along the way, because data has evolved so much. But I would say that evolution, learning, watching this technology evolve and being able to answer more and different questions is what's cool to me. You talk about change, what cloud computing, the fact that you can buy cloud computing with your credit card and, process as much data as you want the first day you're doing it. And that compute has become elastic. That is super cool. And the ability to use all that to answer new kinds of problems quickly it's just a fun place to be. And then I get to be around a bunch of young engineers, and they really, kind of motivate me, and hopefully they learn a little bit from me, and that's cool too.
That's awesome. So we're in our complete this sentence section now. We got 3 of these. So complete this sentence. When I'm not working, I enjoy blank.
Being outside. So I'm, kind of an exercise outdoor, kind of person. So I like to hike and, bike and swim and that kind of stuff.
Nice.
So the next one is also a complete the sentence. I think the coolest thing in technology today is.
I think I said it. It's the cloud. It's, how innovation is changing. I had an experience actually at Microsoft a couple of years ago when I was a CTO of a retail services company, and we decided we're going to move to the cloud, right? And this is still kind of early in cloud adoption, and so we went out to Microsoft and we're working with the product and the customer teams. And what blew my mind at that time was the fact that we could sit with these product people and talk about a need, and they would go back and engineer it and turn around a capability like the next day, right?
Wow.
In the SQL 2005 days, they could turn around a new piece of functionality in 5 years, right? That was the gap between SQL 2000 and 2005. It was a 5-year run, right? So, how fast software could evolve right now is kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah, we're definitely moving towards an iteration economy.
Yeah, iteration. I love that term, iteration economy. I'm going to steal that.
Go ahead. So the next thing is, I look forward to the day when I can use technology to blank.
To solve the climate crisis.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool.
Which is a good segue into quantum computing, actually.
There you go. Yeah.
But let's not go on another tangent. Go ahead, Andy.
Oh, so I get now we're asking no more fill in the blanks here, Rick. But share something different about yourself. But we always include this reminder that it's a family podcast.
Yeah. So I guess I would, I probably grew up before they had the official ADD diagnosis, right? But, I'm pretty ADD, right? So this whole outdoor exercise thing, I have to do that because if I don't do that, I can't sit still. So, that's there you go. That's key to me.
Well, you're not
I dig
alone,
it.
Rick. I was diagnosed around age 47, 48 with ADHD. Um, it was a kind of an interesting story, but we knew something was going on with our son, older son Stevie Ray, and we're not go take medicine type people. At least not first. We're not against medicine. Don't get me wrong, but we'd like to see if there's some other way, outside of chemicals first. So put him through this long series of counseling, and about every 4 weeks we'd meet with the counselor, me and my wife Christy, and he would explain to us what's going on and what he sees and what he's going to try next. Great way of managing a project if you think about it. And as he kept, like about our second meeting, I was like, okay, I know where he gets this. It just sounded so familiar. And yeah, so I'm right there with you. And I
Same
took
here. I have.
until
I'm
I
sorry.
quit. Sorry, that's okay, Frank. Go ahead.
No, I have 4 desks in my home office. So I do the same thing. I kind of harness that energy. I have a treadmill desk. I have a standing desk. I have kind of my big video editing rig desk. And so, yeah, no, because I can't focus on one thing but for so long. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
So where can people learn more about you, Aginity, and kind of what you're up to?
Yeah, I mean, so certainly you can learn about Aginity at aginity.com. We're active on LinkedIn. We have a Twitter feed, so all those things are out there. And like I said, our model's freemium. So if you're at all in this space, you're kind of thinking about, I got to deal with some core calculations of data, just try it out, right? You don't have to buy it. If you like it, then hopefully you will buy it. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. I've been lucky in that I've had a bunch of people who've advised me over the years. And, I'm always open to people who are trying to figure out how to do this, kind of software entrepreneurial game. And, I try to help them. So, reach out if I can be of any service myself.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. Awesome. We'll add that to the show notes if that's okay. We'll put links to all of those things in our show notes. Our last thing is Audible is a sponsor of Data Driven, and you can go to thedatadrivenbook.com, and we get some money off of that. I don't think it's an awful lot, but it adds up. If enough of you go out and get an Audible book and maybe sign up for a subscription. We have 3 teenagers here in the house, in our house, and we burn that. I think it's the platinum. It's unusual. We'll go through a month. I think we get 2 credits a month. It's unusual. We'll go through a month and not buy at least 3 more, sometimes 6, because everybody's listening to Audible books. Do you have a good book, Audible or not, that you would recommend, Rick?
Yeah. So. There's a bunch of books I really like, to pick some obvious ones. You might say the Lean Startup, the Lean Analytics, those are good. Crossing the Chasm is a early book about, kind of marketing in this economy. Right. I'm a fan of all that.
Awesome.
None of which I've written, and we talked about earlier. I can't sit still, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure the book is coming.
Right.
Understood.
But definitely, it sounds like you can listen to a good book while you're out on a hike or a bike ride or whatever.
Yes, yeah,
That's
I love
cool.
podcasts, which is how I came to yours.
Awesome. Well, that really warms my heart. That's awesome. We appreciate you being on the show, and I think definitely when we do get more information, we'll definitely love to have you on the Startup Podcast, which is tentatively called Innovation Happens Everywhere. Love to have you talk about that and talk more about kind of your entrepreneurial journey.
I'd love to do it.
Awesome. So one last question. I'm sorry. You did mention Redshift, Azure, and a couple of things. So it sounds like your product is platform agnostic.
Yeah, so we our own backend runs in the cloud, and so it runs on either Amazon or Azure, or it can be implemented in your own world on your desktop. We talk to all the big cloud platforms and all the really big data, kind of stuff. So if it's Redshift, Snowflake, Synapse, Hive, a lot of the big innovation in data is going on there. BigQuery. We haven't actually done BigQuery yet. Apologies to Google, but it's coming. And that's how our stuff works.
And it's free to get started and download, so there's no excuse for anyone listening not to at least give it a spin.
If you're a data engineer, give it a shot.
Awesome. Anything else, Andy?
No, but I am going to give it a shot. That I promise you. And
yeah, same here.
I'll blog about it.
Yeah, well, please do. And you guys should, write me back and tell me what you like or don't like, and I'll pass it on to our product team.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that, we will let the nice British lady end the show.
Thanks for listening to Data Driven. We know you're busy and we appreciate you listening to our podcast. But we have a favor to ask. Please rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you subscribe to us. You have subscribed to us? Haven't you? Having high ratings and reviews helps us improve the quality of our show and rank us more favorably with the search algorithms. That means more people listen to us, spreading the joy. And, can't the world use a little more joy these days? Now, go do your part to make the world just a little better and be sure to rate and review the show.